Hi, this is Scott Harney from Esoteric Guides, and I'm really happy today to have Christie Smirl here. She's a healer and probably the one of the most foremost devotees of Kali here in the world. And she's based in California, and really interested in hearing your perspective on the Dark Mother Goddess. And without further ado,
Thank you for having me on.
so I want to start out with your personal journey to Kali. And I have also personal interest in Kali as well. But yeah, we want to hear your journey from sort of healer to working with Kali.
You know, my first section of my life, I really knew nothing about Kali Ma except from my own experiences. So I've said this before in other interviews that Kali Ma started appearing to me very early on. When I was 4, I started having wakeful visions, and I didn't associate her with something that was benevolent or part of my spiritual journey. I really thought that she was ominous and frightening, and kind of categorized her into the unexplainable mystic pile of my life, which is a large pile. And it wasn't until I was in my early 40s studying my doctorate degree in Ayurvedic medicine that I was exposed enough to the Hindu pantheon to realize this is actually Kali Ma that I've been seeing my entire life, all the classic iconography. And so naturally, a lot of bells and whistles went off in my mind, and I was already studying spirituality, advanced yoga teacher training and things of this nature that you go through. And so I started looking deeper into her and trying to understand, why have I seen her all my life? Why have I had so many experiences, supernatural experiences, not just dreams or a fascination? And, you can only get so much inner good information off the internet. And at some point, if you want to learn deeper, you have to purchase different books, and you may have to get a formal teacher. So naturally, I bought different books on Kali Ma, the Dasha Mahavidyas, her 10 wisdom goddesses, the 64 yoginis, which are a manifestation of her. I started taking workshops on like the matrikas and how do you formally approach and work with, because I tend to be very academic on one level, but also in the spiritual realm at the other end of things. So ultimately, I think it was 2019, I took Diksha with a Kali Sampradaya, and I had the opportunity to start taking a internship. And during that internship, we studied the forms of Kali Ma on a formal level every month with formal sadhana, which mala, which mantra, what time of day, what day of the week, what do you wear, what do you not wear. And so this highly structured program brought me deeper and deeper and deeper to where I'm at. But, you know, every once in a while I would ask myself, why? Why am I so fascinated, enamored, taken over by the what people call the dark goddess Kali Ma? And it was around the same time I also had my Jyotish Vedic astrology done, which is rather different from our United States type of astrology. There's different information in it. So the first time I had my Vedic astrology read, they said, oh, and they were looking at the chart and the stars, and they said, do you know who Kali Ma is? I said, definitely, now I do. And so when you look at somebody's Vedic chart, you can see who their stronger leaning to work with is. And Kali Ma happens to be my Ishta Devata. So it comes very easy, very naturally nowadays. And, that's kind of the way I moved into working with her. One, from childhood, trying to make sense of all the different experiences I had, and then one from a more formal teaching and lineage practice and sadhana.
So what does that sadhana look like now for you? Do you have a daily sadhana to Kali?
Absolutely. So I maintain a small temple to Kali, and Kali is on every wall or on a wall in almost every room of the house. When I wake up in the morning, there's yantras on my bedroom wall. That's the first thing I see in the morning. My first thought in the morning is Kali Ma, Great Holy Mother. How can I be of service today? How can I become my highest self? How can I be of assistance to other people? And how can I fulfill my true dharmic will? Not just my human desires, because there's plenty of those to go around, but how can I fulfill my soul's mission? And when we recognize Kali Ma as the indwelling Shakti, Kundalini Ma, we understand that every action and non-action is either a state of honor to her or possibly a deliberate, I'm not going to do what my dharma is today. So today, my sadhana to Kali Ma, when I wake up in the morning, I go downstairs to the altar. I have multiple murtis of her, and there's a whole fun process of bathing them and dressing them and serving them. But it's not just, waiting on a statue. It's waking up during the moment that you step into the altar space. It's another waking up. It is a placing yourself into the immediate now and saying, I'm now in front of the divine. I am inviting the divine into my home, into my heart. And what does that look like today? So my sadhana today is mostly japa oriented. So japa beads or internal japa. So once you get to a certain point in mantra practice, and mantra, we have to remember, is a way to control your mind waves. Not only is it a devotional activity, an invocation activity, but it's also a way to control your mind. So during the day, instead of having chatting in my mind, I do mantras to Kali Ma. That way, in between the gaps in my speech, it's filled by the vibration and presence of the Holy Mother. Now, sometimes the practice is more complicated. Some Saturdays we have full day services here. And so we do puja, which is the offering of different sacrifices, simple things like water and fire, fruits, etc. And then we have Havan, which is a large fire ceremony. The participants, they do mantra as well. And sometimes my sadhana expands differently into creating educational programs to bring people into, let's say, a 3-month intensive program so that they themselves can go in and study and understand who is the mother to me. But they say that the highest level of devotion or the ultimate goal of devotion and sadhana is union or samadhi. Some people might call that becoming the svarupa of your Ishta Devata. So becoming a holy vessel. And for me, every breath I take is an expression of my willingness and devotion. So, daily sadhana can be anything from cleaning your house, cleaning your mind, cleaning your body, exercising discipline. But for spiritual practices, I spend quite a bit of time at the temple space. And I'm in a place in my life where I've got the luxury to do that. Yesterday, I spent about 8 hours at the altar redesigning all the new clothing and moving into the new season. So it takes a lot of different forms.
So my personal experience and work with Kali is that she she creates a lot of change in your life sometimes, and she gets rid of things that you don't need, which can be a little bit disconcerting. Um, some people do find it overwhelming. What's your personal experience of this?
I always say, if you want to approach Kali Ma, everybody can approach Kali Ma. She's not limited to one particular continent or culture or religion. She's pre-Vedic, so everybody can approach her. However, I always ask people to make a very clear sankalpa. Why are you approaching this manifestation of God? Because we know there's only one God and there's millions of different manifestations. And people can approach different forms of the Holy Mother, like Saraswati for knowledge, or Lakshmi for prosperity. So if somebody says, I want to go directly to Kali Ma, I'll say, you've seen her imagery, right? Swords, blood, gnashing teeth, fangs, demons, things of this nature. And if they say, oh, yes, I'll say, ask yourself why. Because Kali Ma is the great liberator. She is such an incredible, powerful, and fierce mother that she gives fast, immediate results. Sometimes just saying the words, I want to approach Kali Ma, is enough to open that doorway, is enough to invite her in. And naturally, some people think, Kali Ma is a bit too vicious, but she's not vicious. She's effective. So I tell people, you need to set a sankalpa, set an intention. What is it that you want to change in your life? What is it that you want to change about your persona? What is it that you want to change about your emotions, your day-to-day functioning, and how you are utilizing your internal Shakti? And if people say, oh, well, I want to get rid of this, I want to get rid of that, or I want to change this, I say, all right, set an intention and then decide if you are equipped yet to work with the mother. Everybody is technically equipped to work with the mother, but it's not always a graceful outcome. So, back in about 2020, I wrote a short compilation about the mother and how to approach her from a tripraxis. So, three different ways of working with her. One is as a child, one is as a student, and one is as a lover. There are other ways to approach the mother. But I ask people in the beginning, if you want to approach her like a small child, an innocent young child. And it's wise not to go to the mother first with some sort of demands or commands. Could you imagine like meeting a very powerful, just human person for the first time and you're like this? Hey, what's up? Give me stuff. Do stuff for me. Be my person at my beck and call. Like that doesn't establish a good relationship right out of the gates. We have to develop trust and understanding and a dynamic spiritual give and take, even though it's mostly the mother giving to us. So first I say, get yourself right first before you come to the altar with any kind of wants, desires, but bring your troubles to the altar first. Like a small child saying, Ma, look, I've got a boo-boo on my elbow. Look, I have a boo-boo on my heart. Ma, I have this problem. I have this concern. I don't know what to do. Can you help me, Mother? And that's usually a safe approach. But I do find that a lot of people approach Kali Ma, I call them like looky lures or yahoos. They're like, oh, the dark mother, I'm gonna walk into this dangerous dark zone. And sometimes they get more than they bargained for because they're coming at it for the wrong reasons. So it's all in the intentions. And if your intentions are right, you're probably going to have good outcomes. If your intentions are silly or ego based, you might get more than you bargained for, is what I tell people.
So that's fascinating. You mentioned that you consider her a pre-Vedic deity, open to all.
Mhm.
So a lot
Mhm.
of Indians and some Western occultists say, well, she's more Indian, not appropriate for the Western soul, right? That's some of the Western occultists. Actually, I had a friend that said this. Well, you shouldn't be working with Kali. You should be working with Hecate, for instance. And I think who was it? Oh, there's that famous Hecatean author, Jade Saul Luna, who was working with Kali in India, and he claims that Kali told him to work with Hecate because that's more appropriate to his background. What's your take on that as a Westerner who does work with the Kali energy?
I think that some people are better suited to work with forms of divinity from their own bloodline, culture, etc. However, that being said, Kali Ma, I believe, is for every human being. I have been harassed by different people. I've received hate mail. I've received really rude public statements about my devotion to Kali Ma, which you just have to let roll off your back. And one of the things that is often mentioned is, you're just a white lady. And I'll say, that being said, she is still my mother. And who are you to tell me not to honor my mother? So even people who are born into this culture, born into these lineages, born in tantric homes who are devoted to Kali Ma, many of them have even said Kali is everybody's mother. She is the mother of the eternal void. And some people think that, you have to study the Vedas, etc., to approach Kali Ma, but Kali Ma was pre-Vedic time, and she is a divine blessing that everybody can grow with, that everybody can learn from. And when we realize that there's only one Adi Shakti Ma, Adi is the primal, Shakti is the energy that lives within us, and that one primal Adi Shakti is Kali Ma, Kundalini Ma herself. So when we realize that she's living and breathing inside of all of us at this exact moment, why wouldn't we want to know her? Why wouldn't we want to understand her names? But sometimes we have to start closer to home. Sometimes we need to understand, you know, emanations of God that are closer to our cultural upbringing, things that are not coded in another language. That's also very difficult for some people. Um, but that being said, I believe that she is for everybody, but maybe not in this lifetime, maybe not in this month, maybe not this time around.
Yeah, and there's also reincarnation as well in Hinduism. So someone may not have an actually physical bloodline to, say, a Kali family. Like the recent temple I went to in Queens, New York. You know, almost everyone there was from the same village, and many of them from the same family. Oh, this is my uncle. This is my. So it was almost like a family thing, and they can trace their family lineage. They've been worshiping Kali for a number of different generations. Um, but you may have some kind of karmic connection to Kali, correct? I mean, it could be a past life thing. Um,
Absolutely.
and it came, even when I was, dealing with the wonderful people in the Ifa Temple in Brooklyn. Their take on it is the same thing in the African American community. They're saying, well, unless you have a connection like to the Yoruba, or some kind of like ethnic connection to the religion, you really shouldn't be practicing it. But the people in Brooklyn say, hey, it's really not up to a human; it's up to the Orishas, right? So if the rishis want to work with you, and it says that in the divination, I mean, no one can deny that. So you are finding a lot more, particularly in places like New York, you're finding a lot more like people from outside that culture working with some of these deities. So when I see you working with Kali, I think that's awesome. I think it's great because I also, work with Kali myself, and but not to the extent. Obviously, you've started your own temple, which is amazing. You mentioned her as the Kundalini mother. Could you talk a little bit about, in your practice, the role of Shakti and the role of Kali in Kundalini raising?
Mm-hmm. We talk about Shakti and Kundalini in a lot of different ways. There's Kundalini yoga, there's Rajas yoga, there's all sorts of different ways to touch upon this. But when we approach Shakti Ma or Kundalini Ma herself, and we understand that, if we break it down into physics, we understand that within the human body we have the life force powering us, the soul energy inside of us. That's Shaktima, that's Kundalini. And some people will say, oh, we have to awaken Kundalini because Kundalini or Shaktima lays dormant, coiled around the Muladhara chakra. But I disagree with that. I believe that Kundalini and the Adi Shakti is inside of us and awake at all times, and that it is us that's dormant. And so when we work with Shakti, it's removing the obstacles that have made us dormant, whether it's in the anavahashotas, the gross physical body. Maybe the person's not getting enough exercise. Maybe they're getting too much exercise. Maybe they're not consuming the appropriate foods for their make and model according to Ayurveda and the body constitution. So that's one area where Shakti, Kundalini, can either be fully embraced or limited. Then we have the pranamaya kosha, the breath body. Are we breathing? There's a lot of yogic techniques out there and a lot of levels of awareness. Most people are unaware of their breathing patterns. They just breathe subconsciously all day long. And when we go into yogic practices, we start manipulating with intention the way we breathe to change the inner wiring or the central nervous system. Because if I'm breathing in a stressful way, I am manifesting Kundalini Shakti Ma through my body differently. Let's just take, for instance, if I'm in a state of stress, my central nervous system goes into a fight flight sympathetic response. My heart rate goes up, I'm a little jittery, and I'm on edge for fight or flight. Now, that can be very valuable in utilizing Kundalini, but am I really needing to be in that state? So when we learn about breathing to come into union with the Holy Mother, Shakti, Kundalini Ma, we learn how to go into the parasympathetic nervous system so that we're in a state of calm, so we're in a state of awareness, so we're in the present moment. We also look at the usage and working of Kundalini Ma through the mind. How well can one control their own mind? So some texts say that the mind is like the wind in the trees, or like the monkeys in the trees, and they're very difficult to manage. But if you're not controlling your brain, then the question is, who or what is? So in yogic and tantric practices, we work on learning how to utilize Kundalini and Shakti Ma, our own divine indwelling power, through the mind channels as well. Is this thought my thought? Is that thought the neighbor's thought? Is this feeling my internal feeling? Or did I get too close to somebody else's biosphere and now I'm feeling what they were feeling? And becoming aware of, where does the mind spend its time? Where does the Where do the eyes spend their time? Where does the nose spend its time? Where does the mouth spend its time? Where do my karma organs of the hands, the feet, the lower orifices spend their time? And all of these combined determine if you are devoting your mind, your body, your breath, your spiritual energy to your higher will, to cultivating the highest level of appropriately manifested Kundalini, or if we're just blowing our load. Here we work a little bit of Kundalini and then we're like, bleh, we lose it out of our eyes, we lose it out of our mouth, we lose it eating the wrong foods, etc. And so, I've heard a lot of people say over the years, oh, humans only use a portion of their mind. Some people will say only 20% of the mind. But is that actually true? Or are people only using 20% of their Shakti? Are they only cultivating the Holy Mother within them to a microscopic level? And are they aware of how much more they are? Like, for instance, speaking of Kundalini, the first time I was studying, or I should just say the first time I heard the word chakra, I was like, is that New Age junk? And I wasn't aware as a medical professional that we actually had a subtle body. I dissected bodies in anatomy lab. I never saw a subtle body. I read through anatomy books, microbiology, etc. I never heard about a subtle body. And so when I learned that the subtle body is basically a prime vehicle for Kundalini Ma, I decided, well, I have to learn everything I can learn about it. It's like having a Ferrari and not having the instruction manual inside the glove box, not knowing what grade of gasoline to put in, not knowing what type of tires to put on it. How are we supposed to be high-performing humans if we don't even know what grade oil to put in our systems? So, that was a long roundabout to talk about Kundalini, but, one thing that my Guru Ma said, she said, you must become Kali Swarupa, which means the physical and spiritual embodiment. And not for everybody. Some people are supposed to work with Ganesha. Some people should be working with, other pantheons. But there is a form of the divine that we are to embody, to emulate. And in order to do that, we have to awaken the physical body fully to Kundalini. We have to awaken the breath body, the mind body, the spiritual channels, and know how to work with Kundalini. You hear a lot of people say, like, oh, I had a Kundalini awakening. It's rarer than we think. I like to think about Kundalini not as the sudden thrill seeking that you'll hear people say, oh, I had, Kundalini awakening. And I like to think more from the standpoint of what am I doing every single day throughout the day to maintain and improve my ability to hold Kundalini inside my body? Am I working off of a nightlight wattage, 30-volt wattage, floodlight wattage? And all of that takes some time and devotion, because not everybody can harness that amount of Kundalini without going mad, going crazy.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've had friends who claim to have spontaneous Kundalini awakenings, and it's hard to tell if that's happening or not. In your, as a spiritual teacher, do you see that happening? Someone who's actually not working a system suddenly has a Kundalini awakening?
Definitely. Definitely. I remember the first time I had what I would call a Kundalini movement or rising. I was at a Vedic temple and I wasn't working with the Holy Mother yet, not in the form that I am now. And I received a darshan, and within about 10 minutes, I had to go to my car because I was so disoriented. I felt dizzy, I felt nauseous, I felt gassy, I was crying, I was laughing, I had chills, I had goosebumps, I was sweating, everything all at once. Was that an awakening of my body to Kundalini? Perhaps. It's the only thing that I can make sense of it. But I do have people approach me from time to time and they'll say, this is moving within me. I had this phenomenon happen. What is it? How do I make sense of it? And usually I start off with really basics like, how well grounded are you? What type of work are you doing? What type of spiritual practices have you picked up? And if you don't have any, let's pick some basics up now. Because it's sometimes if we think about Kundalini like our house wiring, do we have a grounding wire? Is it a open exposed wire, or do we have good insulation and proper wiring? Because some people, the energy moves within them and then they end up doing unwise things. And it's I like to call it a currency. Not only is it a current, but it's a currency. And what we do with that currency afterwards is more important. It'd be like, this is an odd example, but it's like going to Vegas and pulling the slots and saying, woo, I won $1 million, and then spending it that day or never even taking it home. When we work with that indwelling Adi Shakti, it's what we do with it that makes the most difference. Because I can lay anybody on the ground and make them do a series of movements, meditations, dharanas, pranayama, and just make their heads spin and have them be like, oh, it was this psychedelic experience and I was out of my mind and I had chills, etc., etc. But that's kind of a parlor trick. So it's more important to teach people, what are you doing with that energy? Are you saving it? And what are you saving it for? What's the end goal? So that's how I think about it.
So, do you work with other deities, like for instance in the Sri Vidya practice? It seems like, especially with the Kundalini awakening, there's deities connected to certain chakras and Tripura Sundari on top of the head. But as in your practice, do you work with other deities or primarily Kali?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, her son, Ganesha. I always say start with the sun, Ganesha, first, and that way you're grounded and your experience is much easier. So there is a bit of protocol that can help ease the work with the mother. And starting with her son, Ganesha, is one of the highest recommended things. I work with a lot of different forms in the Hindu pantheon. For instance, Shiva, the Holy Father, Saraswati, Matangi, etc. But when we look at Kali Ma herself as an umbrella, you can work with so many forms of the divine within Kali Ma. So let's say, for instance, we look at the mainstream Dasha Mahavidyas. So there are 10 wisdom emanations of Kali Ma. One includes Tripura Sundari. One includes Matangi. We have Chinnamasta. We have Dhumavanti. We have Tara. We have 10 forms that are very specific and unique. Different ways of approaching them, different colors, different malas, different mantras, different yantras, different offerings for puja. But they're all Kali Ma. Then we also have different ways of working with Kali Ma, like for instance, through the 64 yoginis. And the 64 yoginis are a fabulous sadhana. There's 64 separate goddess emanations. Some of them are animal headed, say a praying mantis head or an eagle head. And then others are riding different animals, and they're considered a bit more feral and on the outskirts of energy cultivation, but they give us very, very valuable lessons individually. And then, of course, under the umbrella of Kali Ma, we also have the Dakinis. So Dakinis are worked with in other cultures, but the 7 primary chakra Dakinis are another way to work with Kali Ma. So I never get tired of working with Kali Ma. Right now, I'm doing a program on the 1008 names and forms of Kali Ma. So I could probably spend a lifetime, and probably will spend my lifetime, just working with all the names and forms of Kali Ma. But some people get a little bit too wound up, and I've been told before in the past, maybe you should slow down a little bit with Kali Ma and go back to the Holy Father, which gives us pure consciousness. Or maybe I need to switch gears for a little while and work with Krishna and Radha through bhakti and devotion and singing and music and different types of sadhanas. So I recommend to people, if they want to work with the mother, that they also understand that you need other complementing energies to work with and to break that practice up as well. Although in my experience, I rarely will break up my practice. I just keep going and keep going and keep going with the mother. But there are balance and checks that need to be made. Am I working with the father enough? I've had many sadhanas where the mother herself said, no, you need to go to Shiva. Work on your pure consciousness, your tapas, your discipline, your yogic sciences. I've had other times where she said, no, you need to go to Krishna and be soft and be vulnerable and be in a state of ecstatic devotion, and then come back and we'll work with the Kundalini. Through working with Kali Ma, you reach so many different emanations of the divine. But I don't believe that everybody understands how dynamic Kali Ma is. They see the one and only iconography of the sword, the blood, the headlessness, the bloody skulls, the demons and things like that. And I don't know. It's kind of like meeting your girlfriend's father for the first time, and he's sitting on the couch with a shotgun and a knife next to him, and you're like, ooh, I don't know about that. Kali Ma should be taken with some reverence and formal teaching. So there's so many different forms. I'll never get bored working with her. Never. She's a constant mystery.
That's cool. Recently I went to that Kali temple in Queens, and part of their practice was, they called it possession. In other words, Kali's Shakti would possess them. Is that also part of your practice? And yeah, and also a little bit of controversy. It's funny. I got a number of comments, but it was mostly non-Indian white people who were like, "How dare you call it possession? That's derogatory." And because I think they associate possession with demonic, but I said no, this is actually something positive. Anyway, I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
So in India, possession is one of the highest forms of devotion, actually. Some people call it something a little bit milder, like swarupa. So one of my highest orders from my Guru Ma was to take Kali Swarupa. And that means to take on body and form to your highest potential. Some people call that possession. But here in the US, we think about possession in a very limited mindset. We think of like, oh, it's a demonic energy possessing you, and it's bad and it's negative and it's going to harm you. But to become possessed by the Holy Spirit, to be taken over, to absolutely surrender to a holy divine energy is a very commonplace in India. It's seen as, like an honorary position. Like they have these big festivals in the streets, and they very carefully select the people who are going to wear the masks and do the dancing specifically for the goal of hopefully becoming possessed and bringing that energy through a physical body. But there's different layers of it. Having had experience from a childhood level in possession, which was not a pleasant experience, I also have the level of devotion to Kali Ma that there are times, and have been times in my practices, usually it's done solo and when I'm completely alone, because it can be alarming to people, to absolutely let her take over the vessel. But I don't recommend that for everybody, because does the practitioner know the Holy Mother well enough and intimately enough to tell the difference between Ishvara Pranadhana, total surrender to the divine in body, mind, and spirit, versus being hijacked by a spirit who is parading as something that you want to satisfy your fantasy with? So when I teach classes, I often teach like 3 to 6 month intensives on how to approach the Holy Mother. We just finished a 3-month project here on the Dakinis, how to embody them, how to, become a living temple to them. I prefer to teach people beginner steps first. So there's different levels of embodiment all the way up to what some people would categorize as possession. So let's take, for instance, a very simple practice that I do every single day, which is the installation of the 50 shabdas in the magical alphabet of Kali Ma. Number one, this serves as what they call kavacha, a protection of all body parts, but it also is inviting the mother into each of those 50 potent positions on the body. And some people believe that this can induce possession. Well, that comes from a standpoint of people who are ignorant, because the alphabet of Kali Ma is simply the Sanskrit alphabet. So is that to say every child learning their ABCs in Sanskrit is going to become possessed? No, that's ridiculous. However, that's one level of embodiment. So if we know more about just this one simple practice we're taking as an example, we know that the chakras, the root chakra all the way up to the third eye chakra, if you count all the petals, there's 50. So each of those letters is purifying an aspect of that chakra. So it is a magical vibral resonance embodiment technique. So that's one technique. Then we install the mother, Kali Ma, into the body through the chakras. Some people call them Dakinis, some call them chakra goddesses, some people call them Dhatu Nata Chakrinis or Dakinis, because they live inside the body. Well, they were already living there. We're just awakening to them. So is that possession, or is that installation of an awareness of Kundalini? Some people say don't work with the Dakinis, they'll possess you also. But that's coming from a standpoint of warning and danger to somebody who's just a yahoo on the sidelines and maybe doesn't know what they're doing. When it comes down to actual possession, I don't recommend that the common lay person aim for this. I think it's something we see in certain festivals, temples, religious rites, ceremonies, that is to be taken very, very sacredly. I have had people approach me and say, "Oh yes, I want to be possessed by Kali Ma." I'm like, you can't even be possessed by your own mind yet. You're not even operating your own system yet. Why would we aim towards something so big? Because in our culture, in spirituality, sometimes we want too much of the fanciness, or what other people call LARPing, live action role playing. And they want to be part of the drama and the psychopomp. But I usually tell people you need to start off with your baseline embodiment. Do your ABCs every day for 6 months. Do your bija mantras to the dakinis and embody them first for 6 months. Then work with the Dasha Mahavidyas and work through each of their systems so that you can embody the mother more so. And then maybe go through the 64 yoginis and embody those 64 forms and skills and knowledge. And then maybe think about relinquishing yourself to possession on a divine level.
So you mentioned India. Do you go to India regularly? Now, the main Kali temple is in Kolkata, correct? Um,
There's many.
there's not just the
I've
main.
been mm,
There's not a main
there's
one.
lots of Kali temples, lots and lots. So I've only been to India twice, and I did not go there on a mission to find a guru or anything along those lines. But the first time I went to India, I met my Guru Ma, and she has a beautiful temple devoted to the Holy Mother. There's a 108-foot Durga riding a lion on top of the temple, and there's a little tiny Kali underneath the temple. And the first time I met her, I was like, this is my true spiritual mother. And the first time I met her, she said, "You will devote your life to Kali Ma." I was like, all right, that's the direction I'm heading. The second time I went back, it was more so for an academic program that I was part of, but I have not been back since. Um, Here, what my gurus want me to do is establish my own internal temple, my own ashram based temple, and to have community for people so that they can work with these different energies and awaken to them as well. So I'll go back probably in another couple years.
As we can see, Kali's growing in popularity. Obviously in the Indian community, but also in the non-Indian community as well. The dark goddess in general is sort of very popularized right now with Hecate, Santa Muerte. You know, culturally, what do you think that says about like what's happening worldwide? The fact that the dark goddess is making a resurgence, or just coming to the forefront.
Well, I think that this is an important time that we're living in. In the Vedic philosophies, they say that we're living in the Kali Yuga, not Kali goddess Yuga, but Kali Yuga. So that is the demon that manifests and has been banished to 5 locations only. So, we go through different ages of humanity: the Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, and then the bottom age, which is Kali Yuga or the Iron Age. And we understand and look at this particular time frame we're in based off of what it's called. So just for a moment, Kali, not goddess Kali, but Kali, spelt the same, different markings, as I said, has been banished to 5 locations only. Number 1 is alcohol. Number 2 is gambling. Number 3 is illicit sex pornography. The 4th is gold and greed. And so when we start seeing these different types of recognition of where Kali is, we need an antidote to each time and age and stage personally that we're in. And for many people, Kali Ma is that antidote. It's that strength within to go into the personal underworld or internal living hellish regions of oneself, and a way to cope with the outside hellish regions that are in existence in this place that we're physically at, called Mrityu Loka, the Loka of death. So when we see Kali Ma, there's this darkness edge to her. Of course, there's blood, there's weapons, there's demons getting their heads cut off, etc. And there's this raw, feral energy that many people perceive. And I think that it's a reflection that a lot of inner feelings are feeling raw. People are at a loss of what to do. People have reached certain levels of comfort in their life, but are they really doing the deep inner dark work? Because as inside, so outside, as above, so below. And when we look outside at the Kali Yuga, we're like, oh my gosh, it's just a shitstorm. Like, what really am I going to do to affect a major change in this global beauty and global nightmare all in one? And the answer for a lot of people, and the answer that Kali Ma brings, is you have to eradicate all of the abnormalities inside. You have to eradicate and become liberated from your raw rage, from your pain, your drama, your trauma, your ancestral lineage that you may or may not even be connected with, working with. And Kali Ma brings this level of spirituality that takes people off of a pedestal sometimes. So let's just take, for example, if we work with dear Lakshmi Ma, one of the forms of Kali Ma, and she's all beautiful and white with coins and prosperity, and everything is good and everything is wonderful. There's truth, there's beauty, there's love. And that's beautiful if that's where you're at and that's what you've attained. But so many people come to divinity and they're like, things are horrible. Things are messed up. My insides are mixy mix and I'm having trouble. I'm having dirty waters inside and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to work with my shadow self. So a lot of people are attracted to Kali Ma because they're going to be working with their shadow self. And what is that shadow self? It's all of the things that are in the lower instinct nature, things like anger, fear of death, shame, sexual difficulties, confusion. It has to do with, the heart chamber, and can we get rid of resentment and rejection and jealousy and envy and frustration and confusion and worry and depression. Some people are a walking bag of all of this all at once. People say, I'm not even comfortable in my own skin. Kali Ma will make you comfortable in your own skin. But you might feel like you're getting skinned first. Because when people in society are more and more being drawn towards forms of the mother, particularly the dark mother, to me, it's an indication that they're ready to do the dark work, not dark workings like, sorcery and stuff like that, although, it can lead to that. It is to do your own internal work. People, when they feel powerless, hopeless, and hopeless, often turn to Kali Ma, Santa Muerta, etc. So I think it's a telling of our times. And I have a lot of people who approach me and say, I really want to work with the Dark Mother, like we talked about before. Why? But it is the mother, Kali Ma, who in the end consumes all time, consumes all pain, consumes the physical body, takes us back into the void and detangles us and liberates us from all human material contaminations. So seeing a rise in people's interest in working with the Dark Mother, we also understand that we are to return to a time that's called the Sat Yuga. And the Sat Yuga is the Yuga of truth, the Yuga of rising purity, the Yuga of truth and dharma and the restoring of, you know, humanity and the values of humanity, however flimsy that is right now. And as we work on ourselves individually, so all the work I do inside of myself is going to affect not only my family, my mother, my daughter, my partner, people around me. As we see more and more and more people do this on a collective level, we're changing the osmolality of spiritual currency. And Guru Ma always says it only takes one person to tip those scales, and you can be anonymous. You don't have to prove that you were the one to do it. But I think that more and more people are realizing that the highest value time spent is internal work with the Dark Mother, correcting what is wrong inside or being the change that they want to see internally so that they can manifest that externally. And it's not an overnight process. You know, I tell people you're not just going to stand on one leg and do one mantra and wham bam, now you're finished. It's dedicated time. It's every single day doing some form of sadhana and spiritual inquiry and self-study. So I really think that, the rise of the mother is showing the rise of the times. People are tired of the way things are. People are tired of seeing the complete mess that is in the outer world. But really, when has that mess not been there? It just changes continents, it changes power hands, it changes structure, it changes expression. There's always some form of this out there. It never ends. So it's a matter of moving ourself into a new level of consciousness and realizing what is our part. And the Dark Mother is very quick to liberate people and show the true seeker what their part is.
So, how does one work with you? I mean, you're teaching. You have a number of students. Um, Obviously, they can come visit you at your temple. But do you have a? I know you have a Tuesday night program now with. Yeah. So, what's the best way for someone who is interested in Kali, doesn't have much experience, and they want to really get involved with through your program?
So the first thing that I always say is I have a living tantric guru who is alive, and that's the first way to start working with Kali Ma, to do the same program that I did to get where I'm at. As far as my own personal offerings, I have classes here at the ashram most Saturdays, and those programs vary from Kali Ma puja, Kali Ma havan, different rituals and ceremonies that people are welcome to join publicly. There's no experience necessary. Some classes are requested no children because of the intensity or subject matter. So I also offer year-round programs. It depends on what season it is, but they're usually Sunday classes, typically 9 to 5 or 10 to 3, something along those lines. And like I said, we just finished a 3-month intensive program working with Tantra and the Holy Mother. But the other way that I offer those services is online. So people usually book a Zoom call with me, and depending on what their experience level is and what their goals are. I walk them through different tantric processes, yogic processes, Ayurvedic processes, and customize and streamline a program that's most appropriate to them. Of course, there's always the people who will come first call, I want to work with Kali Ma. I'm like, that's an excellent goal, but let's check what's under your hood first. And to be honest, I have a lot of really dedicated students, but more so there are people who are just curious looky lures. So I do take on serious students, and a serious student to me is somebody who's going to meet weekly to monthly, to take a formal sadhana, a PDF, to study, to do that spiritual process, daily or weekly or however it's been prescribed, to journal, to keep a grimoire, to contact me in between, to show me their progress. Anything less than that is not what I consider a serious student to take on. The students who come here in person, it's, 10 hours sometimes, and they're very dedicated and very true to the process. And then sometimes people just need other directions. So sometimes people come and they'll say, oh, I want to work with Kali Ma. I'm like, first you need to stop eating bread and quit drinking beer, because your kapha is out of balance and your mind is too tamasic, and you're not going to get very far as far as spiritual practices until that gets corrected. So there's a lot of different layers of it. I'm also doing a Tuesday program, like you mentioned. It's every Tuesday night, YouTube Live, and we talk about the names and forms of Kali Ma. So one of my requests from the mother was to explore her 1008 names and take the forms, and not just the forever copy and pasted puja book translations, but to look at each name with depth and intensity. So I'm working on that right now. And then I do a lot of writing. I don't do writing necessarily as a teaching project. I usually call my writings excretions. They're art that I'm working on from meditational devotion, or poetry, or channeled words that come through in a state of trance meditation. And so I just share that work, and some people love it. Other people are like, what is this? Strange stuff and strange images. And I just don't worry about the people who it doesn't click with. I just recently had a book signing for Kali Gnosis book that came out, and I pulled out all of my original art pieces. And it's a very interesting process to work with her on so many different levels. And so some people, when they want to work with her, maybe I have them do drawing of yantras. Maybe I have them do drawings of her. Maybe I have them read poetry. Maybe I have them play music, or maybe I have them learn a mantra. So it's very highly individualized, and it depends on that person's personal proclivities. So I'm always available.
Oh, very cool. You mentioned your guru. Who is that?
Well, I have two gurus. My Guru Ma, the one who is in India, I have a beautiful picture of her sitting next to me. Oops, it's not in the camera. And her name is Adi Shakti Ma. We affectionately just call her Ma, or Guru Ma. And then my tantric teacher, who has given me the most direct, individualized education curriculum in the Kali Tantra Sampradaya, is Krishna Kaliya Das. So he's currently in Australia, but he's multi-lineage holder, and has been a phenomenal teacher. PowerPoints and sadhanas and deep exploration, and holding me to the level that I hold my students accountable to. And every month I look forward to a new lesson, whether we're working on dakinis or dharanas or yoginis or Dasha Mahavidyas. And it's been a phenomenal program. I just want to thank you for having me on here and letting me talk about my biggest life passion, Kali Ma. And, I recommend that everybody at least expose yourself and see if that is something that aligns with you in this lifetime. And I always remember that Kundalini Kali Ma is my life force. So it's not like I'm moving into anything foreign. I'm just understanding what is pumping through my blood and moving through my lungs. And divinizing oneself is one of the greatest things that we can do while we're still alive.
It's beautiful. Thank you very much. Blessings.
Namaste.
Namaste.